Brent, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
So the event space, my guess would be that many people underestimate what that means. It's not just getting some booths together and setting up some AV equipment, is it?
Yeah, that's all it is. That's all.
and when the pandemic hit, you just switched to Zoom, no big deal, and now after you're just going to go back, right? Is that the way
that's
it works?
pretty much it? Just building booths again and really trying to pile as many people into a small room as possible, and just see where the health and safety restrictions let us go. Yeah, that's it. The kidding aside, the event space itself being everything from your family gathering and weddings on through to our space in the corporate side. But they all carry that one commonality, which is bringing people together, bringing them together live to see what, like we're going to do right now, like conversations, moments, bonding. And so it doesn't matter if we're talking 100,000 person large scale corporate event filled with activations, booths, inspirational speakers, or if it's 10 people for a very bespoke dinner. The idea of what an event is more relevant, I think, than ever, because for 2 years, we've all been lacking it. It's coming together in meaningful ways.
Love it. So what have you learned over the last couple of years?
The most compelling things we have learned is the role of rituals and traditions, and what that means when you do come together. And for so many things like, and you and I have talked outside of this podcast about the days of just when you'd hop on a plane and travel, and well, Zoom is going to kill that, and we're never going to do that again. Well, I actually believe that at its core, things like rituals and traditions of getting on a whiteboard we took them for granted, but they matter. And if you look at us as a species, the more and more you think of who and how we've evolved, we still are a species that loves its stories and loves its campfires and loves those sort of today's terms or the last 20 years terms of FOMO. We love those things. And really, it's not necessarily about what we have learned in the last 2 years as much as it's put that spotlight on those things that we've missed, the rituals, the traditions, and the ideas of just sitting around and telling a good story. That matters to who we are as a species, let alone who we are as a culture, society, or a business community.
That's a deep human drive. And you're seeing people seek it out in so many new and different ways. You and I were talking about a little bit about how what's the next era of communities and how people are building these communities and engaging.
It's we're going to go a little esoteric for your audience here for a minute, but it's the interesting dynamic in just society of the last, really 100 years as it's changed after wars, after the suburbanification, if that's a word, of America, of the rest of the world, the modernization. We have seen the institutions that bring us together for those fireside moments I was talking about before, for the hundreds and thousands of years of getting together in a cathedral, and you pick your place, a large theater, whatever it is, to have those stories be told. Well, the objects in our society that have done that over the last millennia have been social organizations. And what has happened, or socially oriented organizations, churches, bowling leagues, on and on and on, right? And what has happened in really the last 20, 30 years, but really accelerated in the latest generations and the latest sort of push into digital, is the idea of a community and what used to bring people together as a place for those tribal meetings, if you will, has shifted from those more societal organizations and social organizations to the brands. And it is now from B2C, which is the easy examples. We all wear our Under Armour shirt that says that I'm a certain type of athlete, or our Peloton bike over our shoulder when we're on a video call. Like, these are all things that we are now using brands to be with our people and show our people. And then even in B2B, we'll talk about things like how Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, AWS, they are all brands, big tech, some of the most valuable companies in the world have created a sense of community because we as a society are looking to brands to be what brings us together and to give us that sense of purpose, place, and identity.
Interesting. So the Elk Lodges of the world are now being replaced with your CrossFits or your Pelotons. I'm curious, why the brands? Why does it gravitate that way? Because I know when I was growing up, man, my mother would just, anytime I wanted something that had a brand, written big on it, she's like, we're not getting that. You're not getting paid to wear that. So why is it that we are just gravitating towards these brands to replace that community vacuum?
Same exact, like I still am like, what logo? Why? But weirdly, personal self-reflection is you will rarely find me in that Under Armour shirt, but you will find me in the t-shirt I got at a conference from an IBM event I was at 7 years ago, or like something like that. And it's weird because it is this place of affiliation. And I think that's been, to your question before, one of the biggest things we've learned as especially in American culture, is when you've taken away the sense of being able to get together in person, what has happened is all these online communities have blown up, and things like Peloton have taken off. But a lot of it is because we are longing for the thing to say, I am part of that. And wearing the logo on the shirt, especially when you and I were growing up, the logos on the shirt were commercial and consumerization. And then it became the Michael Jordans and I'm showing like I can be like Mike, and I'm drinking my Gatorade, and I'm wearing my Air Force Ones or my Air Jordans and the rest. And what's happened, especially in the last, as I see it, in the last 10 years, the wearing of the logo has shifted from trying to be like your idol to saying, I am like my people. And because I don't have the church on Sunday, or the synagogue, or the this, or the bowling league, or the elk club to fill it in, I have to use the brand to bring me together with people that look, smell, act, feel like me.
Those like brand tribes almost.
Brand tribes.
And who's doing it? Like, who's doing this well? What are they doing best to really engage with the communities? Because in one sense, I could see a brand kind of trying to push into it too much the wrong way, and it's almost like throwing too much wood on the fire. It's going to feel like propaganda. It's going to feel unnatural. How is it done well?
The first is, the word community is just such a troubling and problematic word in the business community, in the business world, right? And there's whole organizations now that have been really going after this. There's this whole, like, what do we mean by community? Do we just mean another social network, another intranet where people can do what you do on Facebook and LinkedIn, but the brand logo is in the corner? And really that's been what we've seen brands play with over the last 20 years of the digital age is we'll talk about this being in like the fourth era of quote unquote brand communities, where the first three were basically taking flavors of Facebook. Like, if anybody remembers the old platform, like Jive. Like Jive was a platform that looked like Facebook, or the early days of the very simple social networks we all use. We put your little brand logo in the corner. Look, we have a community. Well, what? That's not a community. That's a social network, or that's a community. So you start to go around in the circle. And what's really happened is we're seeing that the ideas of community are starting to be put in buckets. There's communities that are built for support, meaning let's have a developer community. Let's have a product community. And we're all here, and we're in and we're out. We're not necessarily wearing that on a shirt, but we're in and we're out for solving problems, providing feedback in the product communities. The interesting work is happening in the spaces where, and the definition I love most for community is when your members are providing value to other people. So that could be in the form of support, but so what I find is the most interesting is the ones where people are in the dialogue, speaking like the brand, speaking with the brand, and it's the fan community. Maybe too easy to talk about it. Like, we're not talking like K-pop fan, but we're talking people who are in and providing value to each other, but then they are fighting for a larger cause. So the two sort of communities that always come to mind, right, are the easiest examples to talk about. One is in the consumer side, Peloton. At this point, Peloton has become its own tribe, cult, etc., because it is built on a belief, and it is built on a vestige of product and experience, and then people ideally in its most positive form supporting each other and rallying. And then for 20 years in the business side, it's been Salesforce, where they famously have their Trailblazer community. And what is often lacking in the modern narrative of Salesforce was that community, that idea of Trailblazers, as we see it, It started by having the two most fundamental forms of even religion, the two most fundamental forms of having an enemy and having a firebrand. Like, and on both cases, the enemy in Salesforce's case 20 years ago was the old no software logo they used to have. And it was about moving to the cloud. And the firebrand was Benioff, Mark Benioff as their CEO. And what happened behind them is you have an enemy, you have a firebrand, you give them a platform, a digital platform, you give them a identity that they can rally around, and it evolves and evolves and it grows. And all of a sudden you have millions of people around the world who say, I'm a trailblazer. I use Salesforce too, but I'm a trailblazer. I'm doing these things. I care about these things. I'm going after these things. I'm a Peloton user. I exercise like this. I use these things. I hang out with people like that. So it goes back to the exact conversation we had at the beginning. You wear the logo you wear, but at its simplest, the people who are doing it well, the Pelotons and say the Salesforces, they're giving you a badge to wear, either the logo of the company, Peloton, or the badge of the community, Trailblazers, and they're giving you things to rally around: enemies, firebrands, supporting each other, causes, ways to provide value. But they give you a reason to turn that togetherness into a movement of progress and meaning, purpose.
Yeah, meaning and purpose, and I really like the fact that everyone's got to get some more additional value out of it, right? Because if it was just I'm here, I belong, I have the logo on, so I feel like I'm part of something, that's only going to get you so far. But if the community itself and the growth of the community itself implies that you're all going to get more value out of it, then I could see how that flywheel really just starts spinning.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's especially when it's like when you and I would have dinner in the old days, right? Like if you say, I just discovered this thing and you're now advocating for it and you're almost an ambassador, you're welcoming me in because you would have seen me and say, hey, you care about the same things I care about, so come in. But you're also value signaling. You're saying, I care about this. This is what I personally brand myself in. So, hey, I think you should join me. That's as old as society and our species can get. Is I care about this. I think you should too. I think it's cool. I think you should too. And when you come on in, you're going to see this group of people who have each other's backs, who support each other, who provide value for each other. And the brands that can tap into that in this modern form of customer experience and digital experience and the rest, the ones who can move from the logo in the corner of the intranet or the pick your modern version of Jive. There's thousands of community platforms. The ones who can go from just here's a logo and here's a chat bot and here's a forum and the rest, but can shift it into those higher level purpose and meaning, are the ones we're going to see keep thriving in this current age of community.
And how do you, for the organizations that have been so far from this, where do they start and what are the pitfalls? I mean, we work with so many laggard industries where you've got manufacturers, you've got alcohol. They've not been able to engage directly with their consumers at all, right? They've got the brand and then they're separated from the consumers through B2B, through, what have you. And they're just now pushing into being able to engage with their consumers directly for the first time. And they're quite honestly excited just to have a CRM that's getting populated with names and information, right? Never mind building true brand communities. And so, my guess is they could buy a lot of technology. That's only going to go so far. But where do you advise that they get started?
It's two different channels of thought on that. One is a lot of the companies have to understand just past the R and CRM. What is the relationship they want to have? And for some, it's too much of a leap, and to actually think that there will be a direct relationship. And in that case, if they do step into the world of community, what happens is the brand that doesn't understand how to have a relationship with its consumer, they're the ones who create those portals we were just talking about that have a logo and a support page. And maybe that's fine for you. Maybe your version of a community is just going to be an interesting way to democratize and provide peer-to-peer support for your offerings and discussion around your offerings. The brands who want to step deeper into community, where they want, if we keep using the t-shirt analogy, they want people to wear the t-shirt and then sit at a dinner and say, I'm part of this company, or I'm not part of this company, I'm part of a community, or I'm part of this thing, and I think you should be too. And by the way, it's all under the umbrella of X company over here. The ones who are doing that well, the way they're getting into it, the way we talk to them about getting into it. And, you know, this is the disclaimer of when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we're an experience agency that I work for. So here's going to be the answer. It's to create experiences. But the very simple is this 3-part Venn diagram that is this map to what I believe is the future of, or the next generation becomes of customer and digital experience, is when you figure out, even especially in B2B, when you figure out under the word of relationship, how you're going to merge your content marketing initiatives and you're going to evolve that from just straight content marketing into brand journalism. You're going to have a story to tell. You're going to realize your role in providing entertainment and value is going to evolve in the stories you tell. You're going to look at how you bring people together. Is it just booths? Is it going to be your version of in the round fireside chats, peers talking to peers and addressing solutions, not talking about products, like all that very simple shift of how you help people talk about, and do you have an enemy that you're going after, and a larger ideal? Well, events and online, virtual, in-person, small, huge, they are a great forum for putting people in a room to find out that they are alike and that they can form a bond. And then the last is the actual digital side of the community. What do you want that to feel like, be like? Are you asking for not just support, but you're asking for feedback, and you want to bring people into your product iteration, and you want that relationship, and you're going to own this sort of modern push toward authenticity and transparency, and that's going to be a pillar of your community. And if you want that under the R of CRM to be your relationship as a brand getting into it, well, then you're going to build one in the stories you tell, content. You're going to build it in the events you do, bringing people together and sharing, especially peer connection. And then you're going to do it in how you're going to round out that Venn diagram and how you pull it all together with this before and after community that can live on and tie the other two things together.
So some real soul searching as far as what is your identity as a corporation and what is your relationship going to be like out there. I've been I don't know how close you've been to this, but I've been getting rather annoyed with how higher ed has been approaching this space, especially with the pandemic. We're in Boston, so there's no shortage of exclusive schools around here. And I feel like a lot of their focus in a virtual or a hybrid world has been more about the content and the curriculum, and not that much about how are they going to engage and create a community. And so in one sense, they're just cranking out content. And there's this battle between democratize the content, make it available to more people now that you can, versus make it exclusive. And if you don't make it exclusive or have some semblance of exclusivity, do you now start to water down your brand and water down the value of your organization? And I think you've got a lot of Ivy League schools around here that are now saying, well, if this all gets democratized, then the high dollar value that we present ourselves as is not going to exist anymore. And I'm curious, have you been looking at that? Does exclusivity factor into how you define and curate your communities?
Oh, I could. So I used to run digital at MIT for a while, and this was now going back 10 years. So it was on the early phase of this, but being on that side of the table in higher ed, it's actually what got me into events, ironically, and community, becoming so passionate, was sitting in the world of higher ed, because so much of when you think of higher ed, you think of what you've learned, exactly where you were going, courses and curriculum. And really the value, as I have interpreted it and feel it, and there's probably much more thoughtful studies and blogs and books on the topic, but I see higher ed as two things: access and the idea of a brand of sort of what you've been, the exclusivity and what you've been welcomed into, and the, hey, I worked at MIT, just name checked MIT, like, hey, I worked at MIT. Like, I'm name checking them because they let me in. There's a level of exclusivity. And the other part of the value is the networking or the community, and those alumni networks are as important to not just their funding and the endowments of these organizations. They're important to the grads. I've been out of college for 20 something years, and it's what still matters to me. I went to Boston University. What still matters to me from Boston University and I went to Syracuse before that. Like, in both those cases are the connections in the network, not anything I learned in the classroom. However, to your question, and sort of the challenge we're seeing is when you take away the ability to put students in a classroom, all of a sudden it puts the focus on the curriculum and the course and all these amazingly well-paid professors who do beautiful research and the rest. And so the what an organization like higher ed immediately does is it looks where it spends its money and what it does. I have very big buildings filled with classrooms with very well-paid professors. So what am I doing? I am a curriculum business. And the organizations who are going to figure out how to pivot in this across all of higher ed from high prestige on through are going to be the ones who understand their brand and the ones who understand their network. And the courses in the middle are just the, not even just, that's going to bias it the wrong way because amazing professors do amazing things. And so it's not just, but they're going to put a three-piece Venn diagram of themselves together, and they're going to probably value brand and community more than they realized they should have than they were going into the pandemic.
Yeah, you just can't avoid those, just the core fundamentals of who are you and what the relationship is. What kind of pitfalls, or, I always love to figure out where the BS is in a certain space. So where's the BS live out there in this space?
I would say, well, it's going to be curious in the race toward this fourth era of communities, and we're seeing it like there's sort of, in the last few years, there have been two big trends that we see, especially perpetuated by Silicon Valley, by VCs. One is the community. It's go to community, not go to market. And there's this whole narrative now. Community's getting spread. You Google community, and it is sprinkled with advice, and it's so prevalent. Especially again, one of your early questions: what do you take away from people? Is the ability to share an identity, get together. So what gets filled in the void? Community. And of course, the other is this whole Web 3.0, NFT, blockchain. Own your privacy piece, and they are related of each other. It's about establishing a firm identity and privacy, which is Web3, and it's about connection and connectivity, which is community. And of course, coming out of the last 5 years, privacy and community are the hottest things. But the BS is, like any good organization, when the buzzwords carry forward and people don't actually interpret and understand what they mean. Oh, I'm Web 3.0ing right now. Well, I build my community on a Web 3.0, and I've issued NFTs for everybody in my community. You did what? How does any of that matter? So the biggest BS is we have a whole new round of buzzwords that are dominating consumer digital live experiences. And it's going to be the biggest level of BS is going to be letting yourself use the buzzword, but not actually implement the process, the ideas, the purpose that goes underneath all of these buzzwords that have emerged.
I'd like to buy 3 Web 3.0, please, and with an add-on of community. Can you just wrap that up and send it on over to me, please?
Yeah, what do you think the over-under is for the first RFP you guys get? 6 months, I say, is when you get we need to digitally transform ourselves into a community-first, Web 3.0 based organization that issues NFTs on the blockchain. Like, it's coming. I'm going to say July will be your first one.
Yeah, that's coming next year for sure. Yeah, in the metaverse, I would imagine.
Oh, in the
metaverse.
Oh, I didn't. How did I get all through that without dropping some metaverse? Yes.
Interesting. So when you're advising your clients and really setting up the strategy for them, where do you find that when people go into this, what do they underestimate the most? I feel like, when someone might be thinking about how do we engage with the community, they might just think, oh, we'll just hire a few community managers, we'll spin up this event, and those are our 2 or 3 budget line items. Where do they underestimate?
It's the cultural change. And some of it was the same things we were just talking about a moment ago, is opening up yourself to a community. Brands, especially if you get to a brand at scale, but most size companies, it's almost what we were just talking about with higher ed. Let's connect a couple dots. In higher ed, you think of what is my product, right? Well, my product is education. I make this thing. Or if you were Salesforce in a different light, or all the other CRM companies that exist in the world, I make this app and it's my thing. And then somebody over here is saying, I need a community. Let's make a community. Let's bring our people together. And it's like, yes, those people use my app. But that's cool. They're just users. They're not they're or the marketers who do content marketing, they're just my audience. And the idea of a community, and then you hire a community manager, and that person walks in and says, we need authenticity, we need transparency, we need a firebrand, we need an identity, we need something to rally these people behind. They're like, no, those are users. All I need is them to tell me what they want in the next feature set and to report bugs over here. And now you're getting into organizational change, because you're finding that brands, if I go back to the 1,000-year millennial equivalent of religion, all of a sudden brands are now building cathedrals with their own firebrand leaders of a congregation. And people are like, no, that's not what I do. I'm a business. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, and forget the theology majors are going to be calling, but like, what happens is when you realize that you need to build your own congregation and your own community, well, you got to build the cathedral to put them in and bring them inside. And now they're not just going to sit quiet. They're going to have advice and feedback and want to talk and on and on. And many brands would rather just build the beautiful castle, not build a cathedral, where they sit up on the hill and they say, look at us, I lord over these lands. Well, the difference is, and the biggest hurdle is the culture to realize that your castle is now a cathedral. I'm like very medieval here. Your castle is now a cathedral, is a cultural change that starts with your organization. And if you can get that right, then all your community managers you hire, your programs you develop will all find the platform to be successful.
So who are the dragons? Where are the dragons in this scenario?
Oh, right. I don't know. By the way, I've used the cathedral analogy before. I've never used this castle, the cathedral. That just hit me as I was babbling. So it's not well thought out, but now I can see some beautiful whiteboard of the dragons floating in the moat. Maybe your competitors?
The disruptors kind of coming up every 50 years. They awaken and they come to disrupt you and knock down some of your walls, right?
We got to figure this one out in this analogy, because it just longs for the there will be dragons, like or there's dragons.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, because I feel like for so long, you view the customers or the users very transactionally, and then we pushed into this era of really trying to focus on the user journey and mood maps, and now it's just this next level up where it's really, what is that relationship? What is that community? The entire cathedral. That quite honestly, it's not even like you're building the cathedral. You're giving them the tools to help put the bricks into that cathedral themselves, I would imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, so that there's a sense of ownership there, that it's not just something that's been given to them. Well, Brent, it's exciting stuff. I always like to end these conversations on a fun one, which is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, geez.
In life or work?
The one that well, there's a saying that I love personally, which is the old, and it's a cliche, but I just love it. It's the lift as you climb. And it's not me as an individual, like, yeah, sure, like, what does climbing mean, org charts, all that jazz? No, but it's the idea that organizations, things like purpose and all that, they all become weighted words. They become those buzzwords we were just talking about. But the very simple human lift as you climb, it's the do unto others, it's the give back, give more than you receive. We're back in religion, and I haven't been to church in forever, but we're back in religion. But it's that idea of lift as you climb and sort of give more than you receive, right? That very human piece. And then the second is the one that I always come back to, which is at the end of the day, your personal brand can be all sorts of interesting things, how people experience working with you and all that jazz. But you're always going to be built on the relationships you form, your accountability, and the quality of your work. And if you can't bring those three baselines to the table, then don't even bother showing up. And then once you do show up, remember that what you do, and this is especially true for us as an agency, but what you do as an individual in your role is you create two experiences. You create the experience somebody has working with you, and then in our business, your business, my business, we create the experience for our customer, for our XYZ, for our partner, for our whomever. And if you and I, what great advice I was given was, if you and I take a risk, and that experience, we try to do something for the customer and it doesn't work, but you and I had a great experience working together. I brought the accountability, the quality, and built the relationship with you, and we had a great time together. If that didn't work, you'll call me again, because you're going to want to take another risk with me, and you're going to want to lift and climb and try something else with me. So that very simple, do not let the output be everything. Make sure that the inputs and what you do together and all those things that I just talked about ground you sometimes, if not more, than the output. And then you will find personal and professional meaning in what you do.
And a lot more joy, I would imagine,
And
along the way.
more.
I
A
love
lot
it,
more.
Brent. Well, Brent, thanks so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for letting me talk your ear off. I enjoyed it as well.